Welcome, footballers. Welcome, Foot Clan. It is week 8. DFS for the rest of us. Jake Seeley, Joe Holka, Chris Meany, as our announcer voice just said. And I don't know how Chris did. Here's the good news, Joe, is that I had a terrible week, but I still finished in second because Chris didn't join the daggone group. He didn't even put a lineup in.
Third week in a row, Chris just doesn't want to play against us on FanDuel, apparently.
No. 2 weeks ago I played. I was looking for the invite. I couldn't find one. I was disappointed, too, because, I was all about Corey Davis last week.
You're a professional, man. I think you would have figured that out by now.
Ah, man. Drop the ball.
It was bad. Larry Fitzgerald killed me. Will Fuller, even with your 1.1, Joe, so you still were able to cap 100 points, although it wasn't a very good week. I'm assuming that didn't cash elsewhere for you. Did you have a better lineup elsewhere?
Oh, for whatever reason, I just keep forgetting to late swap that specific lineup because it's in a different contest with the three of us. But yeah, last week wasn't great for me. A little too much Saquon Barkley instead of Dalvin Cook, and a little too much Mark Andrews and Darren Waller. So those close little 1v1s, 2v2s, I guess ended up on the other side, and that's never good.
You know what the funny thing is, and I'm going to ask both of you guys this because obviously the big topic was David Johnson, who I'm looking at your lineup for the one that we had, and he killed you with the 0.2 in that. Sure. It seems like the DFS world is a lot less whiny than the seasonal world. Like, we know this, and I'm not saying you would think seasonal know this too. Those kind of things happen. Like you're Joe, you're not coming out of last week and be like, I can't believe the Cardinals screwed me over.
It is what it is. I mean, that kind of stuff, like you said, it's going to happen. Had him on some GPP teams, wasn't on my main team. I think the worst part about it is towards the end of the morning, I just couldn't get comfortable in lineup construction. And obviously, if we had Chase Edmunds, that just would have completely changed the slate in general. So maybe would have figured out a team that I would liked a little bit better than what I ended up landing on.
Yeah, the Chase Edmunds thing. Listen, if you've been playing DFS and especially other sports like basketball, you're well aware of the frustrations. It reminded me a lot of basketball, actually. You don't hear anything, and then all of a sudden it's a coach's decision, and the guy's on the bench all night. And it is frustrating, but that's kind of how it goes sometimes in DFS. But yeah, if there was no DJ and he was ruled out, I think we all would have been on Chase Edmunds for sure.
Yeah, well, I think that he's going to be an interesting person to talk about for this week. So let's talk cash lines. But the good news is, you know this, Chris, the NBA had made a rule this year to get those lineups out earlier if you're playing the NBA DFS. The NBA embracing even more so. Every year it finds that they're embracing gambling, embracing DFS. Good on the NBA. Come on, NFL, follow suit. But
they partnered up. Yeah, they have DraftKings on their floor. So they want people to play. DK NBA, so they're obviously going to give the inactives and actives a lot earlier, and that is kind of how the NFL should go.
Yes, that is true, and you ruined my segue. I was going to say, speaking of joining, I was going to say, if you're not a part of the DFS Pass, to use the code podcast 10% off. But I forgive you, Chris. Let's talk cash. We're going to do Chase Edmunds right off the top.
Straight cash, homie.
So, yes, let's bring Chase Edmunds into this. Now, the Cardinals signed Alfred Morris. They signed Zach Zenner. So how hesitant are we right now in the fact that, one, Joe, David Johnson even plays, and then two, even if he does, is Chase Edmunds now because of the price still hasn't gone up enough where we put him in cash even if David Johnson is active?
Yeah, he's 6,200 on DraftKings, so it's nowhere near what the price was last week, of course. Decent spot against New Orleans, but there's a lot of uncertainty here. I think for that price tag, I would have liked to at least have some clarity on the backfield and some of these guys they've signed in general. It's just always a little bit scary against New Orleans because this game environment's not great, but hopefully we get a little uptick in pace because it is Arizona. I don't know. I don't love the spot at 6,200 when we have some of these other guys as great values, which I'm sure we'll talk about. Getting up just a little bit to someone like Kris Carson, Le'Veon Bell, I'd prefer to do that.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting, Joe, you bring up a good point because in that price range, especially on DraftKings, I mean, you can spend a little bit more and get involved with Bell or Carson, or you can just drop down a little bit and take some shots with Eckler and Jacobs. But I don't know, in cash, even Latavius Murray, right? If Alvin Kamara doesn't go, you're going to save yourself $300 there. And both of those guys were unbelievable last week, 1 and 2 in terms of touches and fantasy points. But the big thing is Chase Edmunds got 31 opportunities, targets and carries. I mean, that kind of usage at 6K is, if he gets that kind of usage again, he's probably going to return value. I agree. I don't love the spot. It's not fantastic. A lot of respect for the Saints D, but it'd probably be a few points scored in this game and a lot of plays run.
All right, so then let's go right back to Joe and bring up his favorite person to bring up. The price is now creeping towards 10K. We are getting to the point where this is Russell Westbrook again. For those people that play NBA and understand what I'm talking about, is Christian McCaffrey still doable? You just plug him in every single week, Joe, but has he finally reached the point where it's kind of tough to do it?
Yeah, we've gotten to the point now where, I mean, we haven't had him on the main slate for a little while, of course, but 9,200, it's against San Francisco. So if you're one of those people that really values matchup, this would be a tough spot to pay all the way up for Christian McCaffrey. That said, probably not going to surprise anyone. I'm not really scared of going to a guy that's going to touch the ball 25 to 28 times, probably get 6 catches throughout the air. So yeah, I think that Christian McCaffrey totally fine at 9,200. There's a couple other guys that are definitely cheaper that are going to draw some significant ownership as well. So I think it's an interesting spot. Like, there's nothing really you can say about it being an amazing spot by any means. Like, it's San Francisco, tough team total, like they are on the road. But I think at the running back position, volume is king. So at 9,200, if he ends up being lower owned, like what do you guys think his ownership is going to be? I guess I'll kick that back to you guys. I think that if he's anywhere lower than 15%, he's going to offer you a ton of leverage in tournaments, I think, than compared to usual.
I'm pulling it up right now. Go ahead, Chris.
I feel like there's enough value on the board where you can just get by with even playing him on cash. And sometimes I'm hesitant just because I want a well-balanced lineup in cash, but with some of the wide receivers, and we'll get to a few guys, and then some of these lower end backs, like, a Ty Johnson, for example, there's enough value on the board to get to a guy like McCaffrey. Heck, even the quarterback position, there's a ton of value. So, I mean, Joe, you said it. If he's going to give this guy 25 plus touches, it's so risky to fade him in tournaments. It really is. But I
wouldn't know because I don't do it.
Yeah, exactly. And there's no point, really, because it's every single – you look at DK, just fantasy points per game, he's got 8 more than the next closest guy, and that's Austin Eckler. And then if you just look at on FanDuel, nobody's even averaging 20 points per game, and this guy's almost averaging 30. So it's such a nice spot with Dalvin Cook playing on Thursday Night Football. There's really nobody else besides Barkley, and he's just not getting that kind of usage. It doesn't seem to have the same kind of upside as McCaffrey this year.
He's right now, to answer your question, he's 6th right now at around 10%.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I mean, I don't mind that at all. And I guess I'll segue us here, just another guy, just because I was staring at basically Christian McCaffrey, and one of the metrics that I love is just total yards over the last 4 games. Our boy Lenny at 7,800. Like, I get it. Like, his price is up there. But by the way, I ran a poll on Instagram if we could call him Lenny or not call him Lenny, and overwhelming results was that it's okay to call him Lenny. So just thought I would touch on that before you bring him up.
You have terrible followers.
That might be true.
I like it. You should call him Lenny. But yeah, at least 26 touches in 4 straight games. The volume has definitely been there. He just hasn't scored any touchdowns. That's really been the reason he hasn't gotten up to that point in terms of fantasy points per game. He just, what does he have, 1 touchdown on the season, but he's touching the ball nonstop. I mean, 4 straight games with at least 20 carries. He's racked up 28 catches and 38 targets on the season. And the Jets have been pretty mediocre against running backs this year.
So I'm going to make a vote on that one, Joe, and I'm going to say we call him Lemmy. Like Lemmy from Mario Kart, because every time you say Lenny, I think of Lemmy, and we need that like little spiked color hair. That's who I'm going. I'm going with Lemmy from Mario Kart. I'm pulling on the Nintendo strings over there. By the way, that's that game, that app. I don't know if we're talking about this, but I'm addicted to it right now. The Mario Kart app, just so you know.
Get out of here! His nickname's Lenny, not Lemmy.
Yeah, we're going to veto you on that one.
Yeah, no, Lemmy. Kris Carson.
Yeah, well, Carson's getting up there in price now. I still don't mind him. At 7K on DK is nice, but FanDuel, he's kind of getting a little too high for me. 8K, but
8,000.
Yeah, he's really jumping up there in terms of price. But obviously, I mean, I still like him playing against the crappy Falcons this week. Can't stop anybody, and you figure that they're probably going to be up at least 10 points in this game, and they lean on a little bit of Carson. It's the same thing we've talked about every single week. At least 21 carries in 4 straight games, at least 24 touches in each of those games as well. The goal line back, catching balls out of the backfield. So yeah, I like Carson, but I'm a little hesitant on FanDuel, especially with that price. And then on DraftKings, you want a back to catch some balls, but he's not. Yeah, he can catch, and he's had some games like that, but he's not churning out like those 5-catch games, and that's kind of where I'm a little hesitant now at that price.
Yeah, well, the good news on FanDuel is that Lemmy is $300 cheaper. That's a Joe shaking his head. I'm going to annoy you that for the rest of the year. Here's a question for you guys. So you've brought up your guy, Kris, we brought up your guys. You didn't bring him up, but I brought him up for you. So let's bring up my guy. If he practices even just Friday, Josh Jacobs in the conversation?
Go ahead,
Yeah,
Kris.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. I mean, at $5,800, he's still underpriced. He's jumping up there a little bit, but this is the most expensive he's ever been. But even still, like, that's a solid price for the offense running through two guys in Oakland. It's Darren Waller and it's Josh Jacobs. So, even over the past couple of weeks with no Tyrell Williams, you're seeing a few more targets out of the backfield for him. So I have no problem with him again in that price range. It's pretty nice, but like if there's no Alvin Kamara, I may just move up slightly and get a guy like Latavius Murray and an offense that's probably going to score more points.
Well, let's talk about that real quick since you just mentioned his name. And Joe, you can, if you want to say anything, add anything for Jacobs, I'll come to you so you can kind of go to both. If Kamara's active, we're going right back to him, or do we worry that maybe it's one game of a split backfield and they don't, they kind of ease him back in?
Yeah, the Kamara one's interesting too, because if he was totally healthy, like at that price, it would just be lock and load, right? I mean, that's a massive team total if you project him for, it's Arizona, right? So, I think he'd probably be the best play on the board. If we could just confirm his health, that would be great. If he doesn't end up playing, and I actually originally thought that earlier in this week that he wasn't going to play just because, they have their bye week coming up. So I just kind of thought that Kamara, wouldn't suit up, and then we get Latavius Murray at 5,800 again. So that's why I was kind of looking at Latavius versus Josh Jacobs, and I definitely prefer Latavius. Josh Jacobs, it is a pretty tough matchup against this Houston team, 5th against the run this year. They have been a little bit worse against running backs in the passing game, but Josh Jacobs still just hasn't had the floor for me through the air. He's not popping in anything that I typically look at, even though he is in that price range. I think I would definitely just prefer to pay down to Ty Johnson at that point, who I'm sure we'll talk about.
Okay, so let's talk. That's the last one I was going to bring up, unless there was another name you want to go to. So we'll stick with you and go back to you, Kris, with Ty Johnson. Kris and I have talked about this on the seasonal side of things, and I've even on my own sports. I've done 7,000 podcasts this week, and I feel like every single podcast has talked about Ty Johnson, mostly off the top. I'm surprised it took this long to get to him. But where are you with this, Joe? Because you could say the price for what you're getting for is the lead of a backfield is too attractive. On the flip side, you can say, well, this is Matt Patricia. They activated Paul Perkins. J.D. McKissic is still going to be the pass catcher. J.D. McKissic's role is not going to change. And for all the talk about Ty Johnson, Kerryon Johnson, who is arguably, and I think most people would make that argument, the more talented of the Johnsons, still was barely an RB2 in seasonal, which also gives you a tell of what he's been doing in DFS. So is Ty Johnson even really as plug and play as people think? Because he is by far and away, it's not even close, the number one projected own running back in DFS.
Wow.
Yeah, I think this is kind of where I'm going to disagree with most people. I don't think he's the lock and load play for a lot of the reasons you mentioned. It's possible they get some other guys involved as well. If you just want to look at his comps, he is someone that is pretty good at the passing game. Player profile has him comped to Kenyon Drake. But yeah, if he's going to get 16 touches at 4,900, I'm sure that'd be appealing to a lot of people. I think he is going to be active through the air, so that's something to consider. Ty Johnson against this Giants team, the matchup's great. I think that's probably why he's just going to draw a ton of ownership, just the matchup, the price. That's what most people are looking at anyways. I'm just looking at the opportunity cost. There just seems like there's so many good running back plays this week at the top end that if we don't end up getting Latavius Murray, I think that it's probably just going to be one of those weeks where I'm gonna be on the other side of this one, I think.
Yeah, it's a little surprising actually to hear that ownership. I thought maybe Chase Edmunds would be near the top, and I guess people are still wondering about Alvin Kamara. With Zach Zenner, off of the Saints, maybe Kamara does play. It's funny, Zach Zenner was with the Saints last week. Now he's going to play against the Saints this week. I don't expect him to be too involved with Arizona anyways. But Ty Johnson probably, I'm not going to fade him at that price at $4,900 on DK. I don't think I can do it in cash to a lot of points that you just made, Jake. J.D. McKissic is still going to be involved. He's probably not going to have 15 carries, but last week was encouraging, double-digit carries. He caught all 4 of his passes. It is against the Giants. This move makes me like Matthew Stafford a lot. I think he's going to step back and throw the ball a ton, and McKissic can catch. T.Y. is going to be able to catch, and Marvin Jones not going to get 4 touchdowns, but he's going to be involved, and Galladay is going to be involved as well. So it just really makes me like Matthew Stafford a lot. But I won't fade him at 49. I'm going to have him in at least one lineup. I have to.
At least one. Yeah,
he is. Yeah, have to.
He's a 5% ownership projected gap over Leonard Fournette and Saquon Barkley for second. To your point, Latavius Murray is actually tied with Todd Gurley for 1, 2, 3, fifth. So there you go, right there. Chase Edmunds is way down. I think this is we don't know what's going on with David Johnson yet. I would expect Chase Edmunds is down by Devontae Freeman and Marlon Mack for about, looks like 13th or 14th. I would expect if David Johnson's out, that would skyrocket up into the top 5. That's obviously a situation. So let's stick with this game real quick and talk wide receivers. Kris, Marvin Jones coming off a huge game. Kenny Golladay coming off a huge disappointment. And then Golden Tate, revenge narrative. So are you looking at any of these guys in cash? I mean, we're like Matthew Stafford, as you mentioned, this is kind of turning back to the old Lions, which the Lions we used to love in fantasy of just pass.
Yeah, I love that. I'm big on Stafford this week. Love him for sure, like I just said. But I wonder how people are gonna are they gonna chase Marvin Jones's 4 touchdowns? I'm kind of interested in Golladay in tournaments, but both of these guys I think are in play. Even against Jenkins, I don't really care. I just feel like Detroit should be able to put up 25 plus points, maybe even 30. And if Stafford's going to drop back and throw 35, 40 times, then both of these guys are going to get theirs. But yeah, Golladay is very interesting because he finished 6th on his team in targets last week, only 2 targets. And it's kind of puzzling to see, but maybe roads close after all in that matchup last week. But Marvin Jones is still in play. Both of these guys are fairly affordable. I mean, you can get them in pretty easily.
All right, well, here you go, Kris. I'll ask you, and I'm going to pull in one of your favorite wide receivers to ever use is D.D. Westbrook. You always pull him in. So I'm going to ask you, guess projected ownership, just rank you don't have to what the percentages is, but these 4, the 3 in this game, Marvin Jones, Kenny Golladay, Golden Tate, and then throw in D.D. Westbrook, and guess what the 4 in order are. I want to see how good you are at this.
Jones, D.D., Golladay, and who's the 4th?
Tate.
Actually, Tate, then Golladay.
All right. Joe, what do you think?
DD's got to be the lowest, right? I actually don't think that Golladay and Marvin Jones are going to be that much different. Maybe that's a contrarian takes. I think there's still enough people that'll go the Kenny Golladay route. But yeah, I'll put Jones first. Who was the other one? Tate?
Yeah.
Also, I'll go Jones, Golladay, Tate, DD.
You're both wildly off.
Kenny
Golladay is number 2 behind DeAndre Hopkins at 18%. Then it's D.D. Westbrook, then Golden Tate, then Marvin Jones.
Okay,
way
so
down.
If people are off of Jones, then, I mean, $5,800 in this spot. I know he's just coming off that big touch, and maybe that's what it is. People just assume, he's not going to do, obviously, he's not going to get 4 touchdowns.
Well, the price jumped a big deal, too. That's part of it.
It did, but it's still under $6K. It's $5K
right.
last week. I mean, it's still decent.
It's got to be people chasing DeAndre Baker, right? I don't even know how you say the guy's name, but he is just trash, and that's kind of
DeAndre. Well, that would be Marvin Jones.
Yeah. Really?
Jonas Jenkins should be on Kenny Golladay.
Okay, because PFF had Baker on Galladay earlier in the week, so maybe I'm wrong. I never look at that stuff anyway. I figure I was trying to find just a reason for Galladay to just be the one that would be owned. So that's interesting.
All right, so where else are you looking, Joe?
I think it's Kenny Stills week, right, guys? 4,700 against Oakland. I don't know without Will Fuller.
Gone.
Yeah, without Will Fuller, it's got to be Kenny Stills week. I think. I mean, I guess if you really want to walk into it, I mean, a team that can be beat deep for sure. Like that's kind of where you want to attack Oakland. Massive team total at home. I think Kenny Stills at 4,700. I think he'll gain some traction as the week goes on. I will say in tournaments, like this is the type of play that shapes up to be a really good fade if he's approaching like that 20% ownership route. I mean, he's probably someone we can only project for 3.5 touches or something like that, reception. So I don't know. I think he's a great play if he doesn't gain traction, but I think he will.
No, I didn't want to jump all over you, but I was laughing. But Kris knows I'm laughing because I'm with you because I hate Will Fuller. You know I hate Will Fuller.
Yeah, you must love Kenny
Stills.
Stills.
He's the better Will Fuller. He's more well-rounded. I actually think 3's low. I think that's the appeal of Kenny Stills is now on top of what we talked about a few weeks ago when I said that QT brings more balance to this offense is like when Stills was out, that's when Will Fuller went off. So I think now you put Stills in Will Fuller's role. I'm with you. The interesting thing here is number 6 projected ownership for wide receivers. I told you the people out there are smart. They're on a lot of these people that we talk about, listening to multiple podcasts, reading multiple articles. So they're on them. Kenny Stills right behind the duo of Kris, one of your boys, Corey Davis, the Tennessee duo. So talk about Stills in your opinion, and then your Tennessee boys, because it feels like the Ryan Tannehill love is off the charts after one good game.
Yeah, you're not going to get Tannehill or Brown or Corey Davis with low ownerships this week. Last week was the time to get in on these guys, but the matchup is so nice against the Buccaneers, who have allowed the most passing yards per game So good spots for all of those guys. But for Kenny Stills, I like him as well, 3 for 3 here. I don't know if I'd go there in cash, but this is a proven guy. I mean, he's hit the 800-yard mark twice in his career. I mean, does he have 21 touchdowns in his 3 years prior playing for the Dolphins? This is, arguably the best quarterback, with no disrespect to Drew Brees early on in his career, but this is the best quarterback he's had in the last 4 years at least. So no Will Fuller, big playability, saw it last week, over 100 yards. Yeah, I think maybe 3 catches is low. I think him and Kiki Kute will probably both be involved, but I like Hopkins. Like, I'm going to pay up for Hopkins this week in cash.
Number one.
Just saw... Yeah, I don't even care about the ownership. Like, I just don't care. Oakland, we saw it last week. Aaron Rodgers had 6 touchdowns, 5 passing. To who? Who did he throw the ball to? I don't even know who he threw the ball to. And Oakland is just pathetic through the air. So I think Watson could, if you're looking for a stack to pay up for, it's Hopkins and Watkins. You want to get some Stills involved there. I think all 3 are in play. There's so much value to get involved with those guys in cash.
Do you remember? I know you were tongue-in-cheek. Do you remember who the 5 touchdowns were to?
MVS, I know, had that long one at the end. Kumaro, I think, had one. Absolutely everyone was in touchdowns. And Jones had one again.
Not Lazard.
Yeah.
You forget Jimmy Graham and Jamal Williams. 2 running backs.
Yeah. 2 running backs. There's been running backs all year, actually, in Green Bay. Both of those guys have been really involved. But, yeah, no Devontae Adams, and Rodgers still shredded that secondary.
So what do you guys got for some other guys in the mid-range? I think that's kind of what I was looking at. I guess the guy that's just been burying me lately is Tyler Boyd, but he's got to be back in play at 5,100, right? If you're just looking at his volume, like last week, 14 targets.
I don't know, Jalen Ramsey?
I don't care as much about that stuff as you guys do typically, so I guess that's kind of why I brought him up. You guys just completely avoiding him at 5,100?
I'm avoiding him because... Go ahead, Chris.
In cash, I'm avoiding him. He's been, the targets have certainly been there. 14 in his last game, 14 2 weeks before that. He is getting a ton of volume. You could make the case for him in tournaments, maybe Odd and Tate. Nobody's thrown the ball more than Andy Dalton this week. Or this year. Nobody. And they can't run at all. It's unbelievable. What, they have 2 rushing yards last week between Gio and Mixon?
Yeah, 10 carries for 2 yards.
33 from Andy Dalton. He led the team in rushing yards. That is just awful. So the Rams are going to have their way. There's no question. And it is warranted to bring him up, but I won't do it in cash against Jalen Ramsey. No thanks.
That's fair.
So here's what I'll say is no, because I don't want the number 2 wide receiver, because the number 1's Auden Tate. That's what it's turned into. Look, I say that tongue in cheek, but the truth is Chris knows this because we talked about it, is the report heading into the season. A lot of people put this out there and they said Tyler Boyd has been remarkably better when AJ Green is out there. And it's something I brought up as a counter argument to a lot of receivers in the past. Chris brought this up as the Juju Smith-Schuster worry heading into this year before Ben Roethlisberger even got hurt, is some receivers can't handle being the number 1. And 14 targets are 14 targets. You're 100% right, Joe. Like, if you told me 14 targets per week for Tyler Boyd, I'd probably put him out there at this price every single week, despite what we've already seen so far. But there's something to be said for the quality of the targets too, and the quality of the receiver when he's facing a Ramsey or double coverage, because certain receivers can't handle it. I don't think Tyler Boyd can handle it. So I'm with you, is I don't want to overreact too much, but Jalen Ramsey, the coverage that Tyler Boyd has been seeing, and then Auden Tate has been better for the entire. Auden Tate was even better last week with less than half the targets. So I get what you're saying, and I think he's interesting for tournaments, not for cash. But I'm surprised. I thought you were going to go for your mid-range boy, John Brown. Hey, you love John Brown.
I played him last week. I think he's back in play for sure. I don't know. Did we get bailed out a little bit with John Brown last week? He didn't even have a ton of catches. He just caught that touchdown. I don't know. That one feels... He's all the way up 6K now. I loved him when he was in like the mid-4Ks, but people are on this guy. People are getting sharper.
I think he's more doable on FanDuel than he is on DraftKings.
Fair. Yeah,
he
go ahead,
he does
Chris.
he does have a great price there, Jake, on FanDuel for sure. Great matchup, we know that. It was looking early in the week that it was going to just downpour in Buffalo, which kind of got me off of him, but it looks like it's clearing up there a little bit. We know about the Eagles secondary, so yeah, he's in a pretty good spot. I mean, it's a cheap stack as well, Josh Allen, John Brown.
Yeah, Josh Allen. Well, we'll talk about quarterbacks for 1 second, because I did want to bring up one more wide receiver, because he's burned us quite a few times so far. And Chris knows this, because I asked this question on the podcast this week when I said this, and I'll ask the question to you, Joe. Do we stop messing around with Larry Fitzgerald and treating him as a wide receiver too until Christian Kirk is on the field? And that's my point, is if Christian Kirk finally makes his return this week and he goes outside in this matchup and you get Larry Fitzgerald against what? PJ Williams, unless I don't know if he's suspended or not, whatever it might be. But if I said the same thing to Pat Mayo, if the guy behind PJ Williams can't take over that spot from PJ Williams, you know how bad that guy must be. So if Christian Kirk is back, do we go back to Larry Fitzgerald even in cash, because now the opportunity is there where he doesn't have to be the number one guy?
Yeah, I don't think either of them are going to be cash plays for me. I think that Fitzgerald in particular, like I had to scroll so far down on my spreadsheet just because like the things that I really value, he's just not hitting them. He's 1.5 yards per route run over the last 4 games. That's horrendous. And basically what that is just consistently it's been a metric that's shown us some of the best wide receivers in the NFL. I always mention weighted opportunity rating. He's way down in that as well, even with Christian Kirk out of that. And that's basically just a volume-based target share, air yards kind of mixture metric. So, yeah, I don't know. Not 5,400. I think that I'm just taking shot on someone else, I think, with a little bit more upside at that point. Someone like my boy Cortland Sutton, who we'll save him for GPPs, but I love that guy this week.
For GPP, you don't want to do him in cash?
I don't know if I'll make it there in cash at the kind of the mid 5K range with all these running backs that I want to play. But yeah, I mean, if you're telling me that Tyler Boyd's a terrible play, I guess Cortland Sutton can't be. It's probably just as bad, right?
I think Sutton's a solid play. I mean, he's been pretty consistent. 7 targets, 4 catches in each game this year. He's hit the 76-yard mark in 5 games. You know, obviously we know that Emmanuel Sanders is gone, and Jake's boy, Ashawn Hamilton's going to see an upgrade in the offense. But Sutton has been pretty consistent, and he's not priced as, you know, a guy that has been consistent, especially, I think, over on FanDuel, 6K. Another guy that I just wanted to bring up, and, you know, it's New England, and you know it's nothing sexy with Julian Edelman, but it's just again consistency. So they bring in Mohamed Sanu. How involved is Sanu going to be in the offense? I know playing any New England player in cash can be certainly frustrating, but Julian Edelman I think he's safe. Josh Gordon it seems like he's finished with New England, and just recently 27 targets over his last 2 games. So if you're going to play one Patriot, I think it is Julian Edelman. just that safe guy.
Absolutely. And to your point, to go back to what you're saying, Joe, over the last 4 weeks, Cortland Sutton inside the top 10 on yards per route run.
So he's got this year.
Yeah, he's got that mark for him. But yes, do you want to do the full screen for everybody watching us, Joe? Do you want to get the full screen so we're about to go to quarterback, we can get the Beowulf jersey? Yeah. Because if you get the Beowulf jersey in the shot, what I will do is I'll also pull this out because this is the Bayshawn Hamilton jersey. So yes, there's some Bayshawn here as well. So Bayshawn Hamilton jersey. No, that was the league that I won with no kicker and left it empty the entire year and refused to put one in for Monday Night Football. And Deshaun Hamilton won me that league because I was down by 15 going into that game. So that was the winning. They sent you a jersey if you won that league. So awesome. I didn't buy it. I bought the Beowulf one. I told you I was good. I'm still waiting for your Will Fuller. I don't see it behind you.
What do you mean? I had to wait until he blew up. He scored like 16 touchdowns one week. I think that if anything, that qualifies me for no longer having to buy the Will Fuller jersey, even though
that's even more reason why you had to. And now he's hurt, and now he's back in worse place because that's what Will Fuller does.
We've been over this.
All right, let's talk wide receivers. Jokes aside, any interest in Minshew back in cash because of the price? The price is still bottom at the league. I mean, you can get a very huge discount for what is not a great or bad matchup either way.
Yeah, I think Minshew's okay. I think I'm gonna save the kind of talk for Chris when he's gonna go over Matthew Stafford. I'm sure Chris loves him, but I think Stafford's a great pay down option this week too. Minshew, I think I might actually be paying down even further to Ryan Tannehill at that point because it's probably Deshaun Watson up top, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But yeah, if you want a little bit of savings, 5,500 is fine. I think the matchup against the Jets also pretty strong. You get a little bit on the ground. I got no issues with Minshew. I don't know if he'll end up being super popular in cash, but yeah, I think him and Tannehill are the guys that you'll probably be paying down for if you don't end up in that mid-range for our boy Matthew Stafford.
He's sixth. That's what I'm holding up. He's sixth. He's at
Minshew is sixth?
Yep, 8% projected ownership, which is actually kind of high if you think about how flat, we talk about it all the time, how flat quarterbacks are. You mentioned all of the guys, Chris, because your boy, Matthew Stafford, is number 1, Deshaun Watson number 2, Ryan Tannehill number 3. You left out one. If you want to pay up for him, I'm surprised that he's number 4 because you do have to pay up. He's the highest priced one, but he's been so dang good with the best matchup you could think of is Russell Wilson.
Yeah, Russell Wilson makes a lot of sense. And all of these guys make a lot of sense. I'm not going to go there in cash for Minshew. I like the jersey.
No, you're going there for Stafford,
again. I get it. But yeah, no, I will. And I'm not totally worried about ownerships in cash, especially for, quarterbacks. I play a lot of head-to-heads and some double-ups where there's not a lot of people in the contest. And, from quarterback standpoint, I do expect Matthew Stafford to be highly owned. I mean, the price is there. Carry-on's out, like we said. The Giants, I mean, they're ranked 27th in pass DVOA according to Football Outsiders, and it's been really strong for him over the last 3 games. So, like the 2 weapons, again, a lot to like there. But I don't know if I'll go there, Minshew. I agree with Joe. I'd rather just spend down for Ryan Tannehill. I know it's risky in cash. This is where we're at, but listen, he was pretty good last week. 23 for 29, 2 touchdowns. He didn't run around last week, but he has before in the past. He's got some sneakiness to him in terms of kind of calling his own shot there. And it's the Buccaneers. This defense is just so brutal. You don't know what Jameis Winston's gonna, what he's gonna do. Is he gonna throw 3 or 4 picks? Then you get set up in a decent field position for Tennessee. He used both of his weapons. This is something Mariota hasn't done all year. He used Corey Davis. He used AJ Brown. If he wants to have success and keep continuing to start, he's going to throw the football to those 2 guys. They're both really good wide receivers. So I like Tannehill. And I was going to get really nuts, and I won't do this in cash. But, I mean, if you're looking to save and $4,700 for Matt Schaub, if there's no Matt Ryan, I know it's a little gross, but, man, the things you can do with your lineup with $4,700 quarterback.
I'm sorry, Chris. I think your connection's been dropped.
6 for 6, 65 yards, a touchdown. I know it all came in garbage time. He's got some weapons.
Well, yeah, of course he's got some weapons, but there's no way. And I'm not doing the Ryan Tannehill thing in cash. Like, I could be 100% wrong. It is the Buccaneers. Buccaneers also get pressure despite. They're similar to the Eagles. You don't run against them. They get pressure, but they're abysmal against the pass at the same time. They're very similar defense. And I got to tell you, if you told me Ryan Tannehill against the Eagles, I don't think I'd feel that good either. It's Ryan Tannehill, recency bias. Yes, I don't know if I can do it. I'm not saying you're wrong to do it. I'm just saying I don't feel good about it. So
I won't do it in cash.
That's a really good point too, Jake.
Tournaments.
I think that the pressure. I was just looking at some of the quarterbacks that do extremely poorly under pressure, at least historically. Tannehill is like the worst on the slate for someone that actually doesn't handle pressure well. And like you said, if Tampa Bay can get a little bit, that could be what ruins people in cash this week. So I like that you brought it up.
Yeah.
All right. So
I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't suggest it in cash.
Okay, last one, because now we have to assume there's no way they're rolling him out there unless he's okay 100%. Drew Brees plays. Is he almost a free square quarterback?
Ooh. I mean, the price is decent. Yeah, I guess Arizona. I know. I mean, Michael Thomas is there. Tough matchup for him, but even still,
you will never see Drew Brees at this price.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to look to see what he was earlier, and he was actually $100 cheaper week 1, but. Yeah, he's pretty cheap for a guy coming up.
Again, you want to see
what's his price? He's not in any of my models right now. What's his price?
63 on
yeah.
DK.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, 63 on DK isn't. I was thinking FanDuel, isn't he?
Yeah, you're right. FanDuel, he's
yeah.
You got to really scroll down. He's $7,200. Yeah.
That's more so what I was looking at than anything.
Yeah, that's a good call. I mean, he's cheaper than Mayfield and Rivers and Carson Wentz and Buffalo in a brutal spot. Jimmy Garoppolo doesn't throw the ball. So, yeah, he's a much better play on FanDuel. Yeah, he does stand out over there, actually.
It's the Taysom Hill discount, right? So when he runs in the touchdown and they don't throw it twice this week, then they can just at least say that they paid less than everyone else.
The Taysom.
I don't play Brees. He doesn't run, and the Taysom Hill thing, it buried me a couple times last year, so I think I usually X him out quicker than most people. But, yeah, amazing spot, great price. He's probably fine, just probably not for me.
A guy we should probably talk about that we never talk about, Jake, is Jacoby Brissett. And, you wonder where his ceiling is, but this guy leads the league in touchdowns per game, 2.3. I mean, he's been pretty consistent, and I know it's the Marlon Mack show there. They tend to lean on him a little bit. The matchup is not awful, but, you're playing on FanDuel, 16 FanDuel points in 5 of his 6 games. There's a decent floor there. He runs a little bit. His worst game of the season came in KC, but that was just all Marlon Mack, kind of part of the game script. I don't think we talk enough about the Colts and this offensive line and what Frank Reich has been able to do with Jacoby Brissett. He's pretty efficient, and it just seems to be a safe floor there with him.
It's an interesting one.
Nice.
I think that
$5,600.
Yeah, I like that he's running a good amount. My biggest concern is Denver's actually the 3rd best team in the league at defending the short passes, and Jacoby has been one of those guys that's just been checking it down a ton. So that'd be my bigger concern. But, I mean, at that price, I think that you'll be unique because I think a lot of people are probably just going to pay down at that point for Tannehill. So interesting price on him for sure.
All right, so let's talk tight ends this week, it's pretty easy at this point, Joe, is you kind of pay up for the big guys. I know you keep trying to find, and I'm not saying this to like come after you, or you keep trying to find cheaper guys, but OJ Howard didn't practice again today. Do Cameron Brate, does he possibly give us an option? Delaney Walker being out, does that potentially give us a Jonnu Smith, or is it just kind of tried to pay up at this point?
Yeah, I think that Jonnu Smith's probably my favorite of that group if I was to kind of get all the way down there, but I don't know, to the point of like Darren Waller versus kind of like the Mark Andrews thing last week, like it's so brutal when it's like that close of a call between two guys. And if you guess wrong, 35-point swing. So, like, that just is so brutal last week. Like, I haven't seen anyone play as bad as Andrews played that last week than anyone in a long time. So, I think Waller's probably going to be chalk, right? Wouldn't you guys say that a lot of people are just going to pay all the way up again?
They would. You called Evan Ingram possibly being hurt by Golden Tate. Kudos to you on that one. And then Rhett Ellison stole the touchdown.
He was expensive, man. Wasn't he like 6,500 last week on DraftKings?
Yeah, they're all up there. So, is it Austin Hooper, even with Matt Schaub, Chris?
Oh boy, Matt Schaub to Hooper. I mean, what about Hunter Henry? Let's not get too cute here. He's $4,900. His price hasn't really jumped. I mean, he was $4K last week. We're worried about him being chalky. I don't know. He's got 22 targets, 18 catches, 257 yards in 3 games. I mean, 85 yards per game ranks first among tight ends. His 6 catches per game ranks third. He's getting a ton of volume, and he just seems to be the number one option for Phillip Rivers and a team that's really struggled to run the football since Melvin Gordon's been back. So I'm just going to take the price point, $4,900, and lock him in.
Well, on FanDuel, he's 60. It's 69 for Kittle, 68 for Waller, 67 for Henry, and 66 for Hooper.
Well, DK's snoozing. But yeah, I mean, Hunter Henry, even at $6,700, it's fine. I mean, $100 more for Waller, I guess it's fine. It's the 1-2 guys. Those are the 2 guys that I feel safest about. Hooper, I don't know without Matt Ryan. And Zach Ertz, I guess, could be okay. No Matt Milano for the Bills, who's probably their best linebacker in terms of coverage. And you saw Gesicki had his best game of the season last week when he went down. I know he only had 4
finally,
catches.
Joe.
I only had 4 catches, but I mean, he at least showed up. So potentially one of the 2, but maybe not there in cash. Between Ertz and Goddard, maybe you can take a shot on either of those guys in tournaments. But I'm not going to get too cute here with tight ends. I'm going to go Waller or Henry.
Well, there's one, Joe. We're not. Hey, I just mentioned Rhett Ellison, and we don't have the worst tight end in the history of the world in front of Josh Hill to deal with. Josh Hill's facing the Cardinals, 5,000 on FanDuel, super cheap on DraftKings. Are you really shaking your head at Josh Hill?
No chance, man. I don't know. I struggle. I guess that's kind of brutal for me to say because I've recommended Noah Fant a couple times this season. It's just.
Well, let me ask you this, Joe. This is a legitimate question when it comes to Josh Hill.
Sure.
Because this is now the Drew Brees situation side of it. We talk about it all the time, and we say Drew Brees just spreads the ball around, and if it's probably not going to be Josh Hill, it'll be whoever, Dan Arnold, if he's active again. So if it's Teddy Bridgewater, do you feel a little bit better about Josh Hill because at least he doesn't spread the ball around as much as Drew Brees?
That's true. And one thing that I always kind of talk about, too, at tight end that's so important is team total. And it's a pretty massive team total for New Orleans. So if he does end up being the one that gets there, maybe you do think that Patrick Peterson's going to take away Michael Thomas. I think he would make some sense if you really wanted to pay all the way down. But I like the Goddard call. I think if you're going to go all the way down there, he would be the guy that I would probably prefer if we don't end up seeing any other value open up.
I know we briefly touched on Jonnu Smith, but $2,800 on DraftKings, if there's no Delaney Walker, I mean, it's probably going to be pretty popular, but if you're going to spend down at tight end, that's the way to do it.
Yeah.
I can't believe we're talking about these guys. All right, so let's move.
Tight end, man.
I know. It's so sad. So let's talk about, let's get our GPP lineup, or well, not lineups, but let's talk about the GPP plays, I should say.
You down with GPP?
And as always, I forgot to talk defenses, but we've kind of been looping them at the end of GPPs anyway. So let's just forget defenses for now. We'll come back to them. Running back, GPPs. This has generally been, Joe, we're not that much different because it's pay up for running backs, for that safety, for that reliability, and we kind of chase more at wide receiver so far.
Sure, yeah, I think that one guy that makes a lot of sense. So I think at running back, it's more of like a price pivot thing for me. So if Kris Carson ends up being super chalky, like Le'Veon Bell at 6,900, only 100 less, like on FanDuel, it's a huge difference, right? So Kris Carson's 8K, Le'Veon Bell is 7K, but on DraftKings, it's so much closer. I don't think a lot of people are going to click Le'Veon. He's still someone that's going to get great usage in the passing game. I think the ceiling is definitely worse. I mentioned total yards over the last 4 when I was talking about Christian McCaffrey and Leonard Fournette. But same kind of thing with Bell, but it's like drastically different, right? So Bell, 70 yards per game, total yards over the last 4. Kris Carson's over at 125. So at that point, I mean, Kris Carson's certainly the higher equity play, but I think that he makes a decent price pivot on DraftKings in particular.
Yeah, Kris Carson is number 4. Le'Veon Bell is down by, he's 10th. So there you go, to your point. Actually, a 9% gap in projected ownership.
What do you think,
Bell.
Chris?
Yeah, Bell's a great play, and we've been talking about him. He hasn't had that blow up game yet. I do believe it's coming. The schedule gets a little bit lighter for him. You're right. Even in a tough matchup against New England, in terms of just yards per carry, that was his best showing as a Jet. I mean, 70 yards on 15 carries. Wasn't really involved in the passing game, but it was just such a tough matchup. I mean, they scored 0 points against New England, so it gets a lot easier against Jacksonville. I know Todd Gurley is going to be a little bit expensive. If Gurley can't have a solid game on the ground against the Bengals, he may be done. I mean, really, you look at the yards per carry for Gurley, 2.3, 3.4, 3.2, 3.1, 3.9. It's been very, very mediocre. But this Bengals team has allowed a league worst 189 rushing yards per game. Gurley's still involved through the air. Even though he wasn't efficient last week on the ground, he had the receiving touchdown. So he's still kind of involved in the passing game. This is a Bengals team that they have so many injuries. They're checked out. We said it last week. I think it was over 500 yards of rushing they had allowed in back-to-back weeks, and then even last week was just not great. So Fournette didn't find the end zone, but he had a decent game. So I have no problem going to Gurley. I won't go there in tournaments, but I think he's a decent, or cash, I think he's a decent tournament play.
What do you think, guy? Let's go back to that Lions thing. What about J.D. McKissic? If everybody's going to be on Ty Johnson, to your point about the price point and pivoting, and what if it ends up being a McKissic game, kind of like a James White type of situation, Joe?
Yeah, I think like super large field, maybe that would make some sense. It's really hard to get on board with that kind of uncertainty. That's like my biggest issue with, I guess, the play in general going after a Detroit running back this week. But yeah, I think you'll get super low ownership on him for sure. I guess we haven't, and I guess kind of circle back quickly on Todd Gurley. That price scares me for a guy that just hasn't shown much mobility. Like he's kind of like a straight line runner at this point. And that scares me. Like it's a great matchup for sure. He could easily kind of run his way into a few touchdowns, but 7,400, you need a lot from him at that point. And I actually don't have him projected for as many catches as a lot of these other guys we've been kind of talking about. But it's an interesting one. I mean, kind of being first on a guy if he's not truly done, but at the same time, being able to realize if he's done, getting off that train makes some sense as well.
All right, well, then let me give you one more, and same question for you, Chris. One team we really haven't talked about a lot, and we'll bring them up again. We'll pivot, stay with this team and go right to wide receiver. We can say all that. White to receivers. The Nick Chubb, Patriots. Like, everybody's just off Patriots if you look at who they played so far. Okay, fantasy-wise defense, it's been amazing. Let's talk about real life and real life quarterbacks they faced and real life offenses they faced. Yes, I still think they're a great defense, but maybe they're just, not been tested so far. They're facing Nick Chubb. They're facing Odell Beckham. Baker Mayfield's been miserable. The offensive line's been miserable, yes. But coming off this bye, for how good Nick Chubb is, for Nick Chubb to be under Carlos Hyde, Dare Ogunbowale, J.D. McKissic, David Montgomery in ownership, is this not a pivot opportunity, Joe?
I love it. He was one of the guys that I was going to bring up, actually. I was kind of picturing either him or Le'Veon Bell being like the Kris Carson pivot, but Chubb is 6,600 on DraftKings, 77 on FanDuel. I don't think many people are going to click that against the Patriots, but he's still someone that's really popping as far as his yards from scrimmage over the last 4. So I think that he's someone that if we do get some usage in the passing game at that price, he really stands out if we don't end up getting the value of someone like Chase Edmunds or Latavius. At that point, of course, I'd rather have those guys.
Yeah, Chubb is interesting. He was a great pivot, I think, a couple weeks ago as well when they played Baltimore. He had the big game, 165 yards, when everybody was out on Cleveland, and nobody's going to be in on Cleveland this week. And Odell Beckham Jr. is probably going to get shut down by Belichick and Stephon Gilmore. I think we can agree on that. So it could be a lot of Chubb. It could be a lot of Landry. No, you're not feeling that? I mean, Odell's been shut down in games. This Baltimore completely took him away. I have a lot of confidence in Gilmore and Belichick that their focus is going to be on Odell. So it could mean a lot of Chubb. And in terms of just DK points per game on this slate, third most, he's been pretty consistent. Nobody's really talking about Chubb this year. So he's the goal line back. Kareem Hunt's not involved. He's catching balls out of the backfield. I like that call as well. And I'm going to actually roll the dice on probably Austin Eckler. I wonder what the Chargers... Nobody knows what the Chargers are going to do if they're going to just say, hey, we were almost undefeated with Eckler, and ever since Melvin Gordon's been in here, we've been awful. We haven't won a game. We gave him 2 chances at the one. He couldn't get in. But Eckler, especially on DraftKings, where he's down under 6K now, 25 catches in his last 3 games. You just saw Latavius Murray have a monster game against this Bears defense. So I know it's really risky. I don't think people are going to go there, and that's what I like. Joe, you brought up great points with Gurley. That's what I want. I want people to be scared off these guys in tournaments. I want to try to get a low ownership running back with a high ceiling.
See, and that's why I say not because I don't think Stephon Gilmore can lock down Odell Beckham, and I don't think the Patriots can stop Odell Beckham and focus on him. I'm just saying I've also seen teams try to do it before in the past, and Odell Beckham be Odell Beckham. So it was more so, I guess, the tone felt like it was a certainty. And I would say, of course, hey, this is a kind of a statty type of show, like percentage-wise. I think there's like a 20% chance Odell Beckham smashes.
20's not great for Odell Beckham.
No, but it is when it's at a discounted price at a zero, like essentially kind of like what, a 2% ownership. I mean, that's what's projected right now, and I wouldn't be surprised if that's what you see in the majority of your leagues that you're not leagues or games that you're playing in. So for that opportunity, again, Joe said it before when we're talking about the McKissick type of situation. I think that's similar. It's like it's a big field. It's a big field. Maybe 1 out of your 10 lineups. I'm not looking to have a high ownership, but I'm not going to write off Odell Beckham 100%. Is basically what I'm saying.
Yeah, I don't want to write him off either. I mean, it's just Baker Mayfield in this offensive line. I mean, he's got 5.
Well, here's the comparison.
11 picks.
Would you rather start Odell Beckham at a decreased price and ownership that's around Jaron Brown, Philip Dorsett, Nelson Aguilar, Anthony Miller, Jacoby Myers? I mean, that's where he is.
Yeah, no, it's clear. We brought him up a couple weeks ago. Same thing against Seattle. Nobody was in on this guy. He just came off a down game against San Fran where he had 2 balls, and then he had 100 yards. And Jake, you said it a couple times, probably the quietest 100-yard game, all year.
Anybody's ever had.
Yeah, nobody really talking about him. But that range in DK, I mean, there's some interesting guys. They all come in a row, like Mike Evans, Odell Beckham Jr., Keenan Allen. I think, most people are out on a lot of those guys. Keenan's been very
What about Keenan Allen?
Yeah, I would take a shot. If I was going to take a shot on one of the 3, it may be Keenan Allen. I think maybe they just try to go back to what was working for them earlier in the year. But again, Hunter Henry's getting a lot of targets there. I don't mind a shot on any of those guys because one guy we never talked about is Godwin. I think we're just forgetting how good he's been this season. Before the bye, he was leading every single category among wide receivers.
Yeah, lots to kind of unpack there. I think that the Odell thing, like that week that you guys were talking about, I actually ended up playing him at a similar price point, but the Seattle matchup still feels different to me than New England. I could see it maybe working out, but at 6,500, like you said, I think I prefer to go to someone like Mike Evans at that point, just someone that I think has a little bit of a higher ceiling. I don't know if there's going to be a ton of ownership there regardless. The Keenan Allen thing, I still struggle a little bit because I'm a little bit on the Mike Williams train still. Just his price hasn't really moved, and he's still seeing a large chunk of those air yards. Again, the Chargers, too, over the last 3 weeks have thrown more than any team in the NFL. So Mike Williams, he almost had a touchdown last week. He's still someone that is that big target in the end zone. At 4K, I'm going to keep firing at Mike Williams. He was in my pool until really late for my main team last week, and I expect him to be there again this week.
All right, so let me bring out one more name for you guys. And I don't know, part of it, people see the matchup. You brought up the quarterback before, Chris. I'll give you a hint there. How about, here's another one. I'll give you another hint. Chris Harris is talking about shutting him down this week. I am going to be all over stopping T.Y. Hilton. Tournament play, T.Y. Hilton? I mean, or is the Chris Harris concern enough for you guys to say, no thanks?
Yeah, I don't think I'm good. I know I brought up Jacoby. Interesting, maybe stack in tournaments. You go Jacoby and Ty, but yeah, Chris Harris does scare me. I'll be honest.
Yeah, I don't know. I wasn't even on Ty last week, which buried me just at the ownership and whatnot. I guess I struggle a little bit with the combination of Ty and Jacoby, just because you would think that Ty is a guy that would have just this massive downfield upside, but he's just not pushing it downfield. So not so much interested in that one, I don't think.
Jake, there's a couple other guys we haven't brought up. Seattle, Russell Wilson, right, against Atlanta. Every team is torching. Tyler Lockett seems obvious at this point. We didn't bring him up in cash. The targets, they haven't really been there. He's been so efficient, catching the few targets that he gets touchdowns. But I also have some interest in DK Metcalf as well. I think if a lot of people are in on Carson and his ownership is high, maybe you do fade away from the run game and you try, a couple of these wide receivers.
He's 7th at wide receiver projected ownership.
Ty?
Is he?
No, DK Metcalf.
Or DK Metcalf is 7?
Yes. That's why I didn't bring him up. I should have said that's why I wasn't bringing him up. Like I was shocked to see it that high. But the truth is, if people haven't seen the stat, this is an insane stat. For as many touchdowns he's scored already, he has 10 red zone targets and 0 touchdowns on them. That's insane.
Unreal. Yeah, and Disley gone. You're right. He was Wilson's favorite target in the red zone.
Yeah. So
What's
I
the
mean,
ownership on Lockett?
Lockett's I think right there he's 2 spots behind him. It's DK Metcalf, Michael Thomas, Tyler Lockett.
Both pretty choppy.
Which makes sense.
Yeah.
People are too smart.
We're like overthinking it. I'm doing this. I feel like there's certain times where it's like, oh, there's no way this guy is going to be owned. Like he's such a sharp kind of under the radar play. But people are looking at the right things now. Or at least there's like a lot of good content out for it now. So it's just like you can overthink it at times too. These guys that you think are going to be sneaky are just not. Like I heard someone talking about like the Rams wide receivers last week. Even got someone like Cooks like is popping and air yards, that sort of thing. But like he's like 20% owned in tournaments. Like last year, the year before that, he's like sub 5%. It's crazy.
Yeah, recency bias is such a thing a couple years ago. Nobody would want anything to do with Cooper Kupp this week. Like Cooper Kupp's an interesting guy to bring up too. I mean, earlier in the year, since he was great against slot wideouts, but you saw last week D.D. Westbrook popped. He had a great game, and now Cooper Kupp. You know, some people I heard on one DFS show is, I'm not touching Cooper Kupp. No way. I mean, this guy burned me 2 weeks in a row. Well, he still had 10 catches in his last 2 games. It's still pretty decent.
I'm smiling because that's exactly where I was going next for you guys, is that we didn't mention the Rams in cash. We haven't mentioned them yet, but now we're bringing them up because, to your point, so Cooper Kupp is the highest projected ownership so far of the Rams wide receivers, but he's not even inside the top 15. He's down by Larry Fitzgerald and Mike Williams. To go further, Brandon Cooks is down by Bayshawn Hamilton and Kiki Cutie. To go even further, Robert Woods is barely inside the top 50, down by Curtis Samuel, Mohamed Sanu, and Emmanuel Sanders, 2 people that just got traded.
Wow. And Woods coming off one of his better games of the season, right? 80 yards and 5 grabs. Interested. I wouldn't avoid those guys. Rams could score 50 points this week in London.
It's a tough one to sift through. Like I always kind of struggle with these guys because I think it's so much different than it was in years past, where it was kind of spread out. Like Cooper Kupp until the last couple of weeks, like he's just been such a big part of their team this year. So like going back to him, if you think that I was never really willing to buy that he was like the new Michael Thomas in terms of volume, but I do think that Cooper Kupp, going back to him, would be solid. I mean, if he's still going to be owned for sure, and he's expensive, so you're going to have to make it work. But Cincinnati seems like a great spot to jump back on the Rams in general, minus Gurley, in my opinion.
Jake, if you want to be ultra contrarian, give me some ownerships on the Jets. And we just saw Sam Darnold on primetime, seeing ghosts. Everyone's talking about that. I mean, Robbie Anderson and Jamison Crowder checks in at under 5. It's not an awful matchup against Jacksonville. There's no Jalen Ramsey anymore.
Here's the crazy thing. All 3 of the wide receivers are at 2% ownership, which doesn't sound like a lot, but they're down around Brandon Cooks, Keenan Allen, Tyrell Williams, there's Demaryius Thomas, obviously, Cole Beasley, Alshon Jeffrey. That's the group that they're in. So they're off, but they're not 100% off.
Yeah, I have no interest in Demaryius, or really Crowder, but Robbie Anderson is the deep threat guy. I mean, 16 targets in his last 2 games with Sam Darnold is. I mean, I'm not going to ignore 8 targets for a guy under 5K.
I'm surprised there's that much, Joe. Even because the people still, AJ Bouye is still really good, but Jalen Ramsey's gone. And Jacksonville's been good, but again, it's not. I actually don't. I think their defenses are pretty similar. Like, it's not a good matchup. It's not one to avoid.
Yeah, I think both. I mean, Chris kind of mentioned a lot of the things that I was going to mention in this situation. I think that people are kind of scared off of this defense. I'm not quite sure why. I think that. There's a couple really cheap options from that game that can help you kind of get elsewhere at other positions that are more important. But Le'Veon's still the guy that I think I prefer in that offense. I think Le'Veon and Fournette are fine together. I always feel like I should mention that because I get at least one tweet per week. It's like, can you play these 2 running backs in the same game in the same lineup? If they're pass-catching running backs, yeah, I think you can. I think that the ceiling's fine either way. But yeah, it's an interesting game, that's for sure. I think that's going to be lower owned than most people realize.
All right, so any quarterback picks for you guys? Hey, Chris, you know who's super low owned projected ownership?
Matt Schaub.
No, Daniel Jones. You want to go to Daniel Jones?
No, I don't. Not going there again. I had him last week, and it was a mistake. Yeah, Jones. I don't think I'll play him the rest of the year. Yeah, maybe when Shepard gets back, who knows? Maybe I'll throw some money away there. But no, not
actually.
at $5,800.
Just so you know, sorry to jump in, but just so you know, there was a report while we're doing this show that said Sterling Shepard, a strong possibility he doesn't suit up still this week.
Yeah. Now, Jones was interesting when he was 52, 51.
No, he wasn't.
He's not at 6K. Not or close to it. No thanks.
What about Tom Brady? He's behind Mitch Trubisky in projected ownership.
I don't know. I haven't played Tom Brady in like 3 years, so you guys would be better have to.
Me neither. I don't play Tom either. Maybe it's a mistake. I don't know. I'm not actually sold on this New England offense. I just feel like, we've said it a couple times. They just had such a cakewalk schedule. And I saw a stat the other day. I wish I could remember who it was from so I can give them some credit. But if New England's offense didn't even take the field, they would have 3 wins still. Like, unbelievable stuff. All their points come from defense. It's crazy. Yeah. So Tom, I'm out on Tom, but the only pad I would play, I think, is Julian Edelman, and even in tournaments, his ceiling is not high enough for me to go there.
But
how about Tom in your XFL lineup next year?
What's great about Edelman, though, I think he would be the guy that I'd be going after too. He's the one that, like, the constant, right? The one guy in that in that lineup that you really know exactly what you're getting. I just really try and avoid these teams where I truly have no idea what they're going to do week in and week out. It's not even that they're just always kind of going after weaknesses. Like, they're just, I don't know, outsmarting everyone, including me. So I tend to avoid those situations in single entry.
Yeah, I feel like let's just go to tight end. I feel like tight end's kind of similar to quarterback. You can't get too cute. I mean, if you're going to get too cute, you're just going to more often than not hurt yourself. So are we talking about the same guys, Joe, or is it the same guys at tight end that we were talking about before for cash?
One guy we didn't mention, Gerald Everett, like we were just talking about the Rams. I think he's the guy that I actually really like this week. So just looking, I mean, it's green across the board. Like they're one of those teams that can project for a ton of plays this week, massive total. We need that at tight end. He's running the second most routes over the last 4 games to Austin Hooper on the slate. Like we know that that's part of the reason that Robert Woods has been not as effective this year, hasn't scored a touchdown. It's because of Gerald Everett and his usage in the red zone. So I think if we get Gerald Everett like sub 5%, like he'd be a nice piece of this game to attack. Like, if we want to attack Cincy, I think that we could do it with someone like Everett for sure and kind of avoid the rest of the mess for the Rams.
Yeah, I like the Everett call.
He is 9th right now, Chris. He is 5% projected ownership right now.
Let's go.
9th.
There you go.
Yeah, I like it. 34 targets, the most among tight ends over the last 4 weeks. And we know, we said it, I think, a couple weeks ago where they play San Fran. Goff missed him in the end zone. And Everett had a touchdown last week, but Goff missed him again. And obviously that's, you get a little scared with Goff as your quarterback. But even still, like, those opportunities are absolutely there. So Joe brings up a great point, and that he's exactly right on Cooks or Woods. He just hasn't been the same guy this year. And Gerald Everett is cutting into a lot of that.
Yes. What about, I'll give you guys one more because they have been abused by tight ends so far. That's being the Raiders. Darren Fells. It was interesting, but he's gone quiet, so now everybody's completely off of him.
Yeah, I'm not going to go there at that price, 34. It does make sense, maybe the one touchdown he can get.
Well, he has some big games, too.
There's a couple guys, like, I don't know, if you're going to do some dart throws, I mean, Ricky Seals-Jones has got 2 touchdowns in his last 3 games. If Odell Beckham Jr. gets shut down, I mean, he's cheaper. I know it's blah, but, like, this is what it's come to.
He's actually more expensive on FanDuel. Is to this whole point, Josh Hill's still cheaper than Darren Fells. I just brought up another name just to throw out there.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah,
all these guys feel kind of similar at that point, right? Like, if you're playing MME, just, like, sprinkle them in, hope to catch fire.
Well, explain what but a lot of people might not know what you mean.
So if you're playing a lot of lineups, right, like just like a position like this where there's going to be a ton of variance, and if you are paying down for some of these guys, it would make more sense to play like 5 to 10% of these guys instead of just like planting your flag on a tight end that's sub 3K and having them in 50% of your teams. Like that's how I would approach it.
Yeah. Okay. I just wanted you to explain.
Yeah, sure.
A lot of people might not understood what you said for the multi-entry situation. All right. So let's talk defenses, both cash and tournament. Are you looking? I guess that's the real question, Chris. Do you usually just play the same defense in both, or do you ever play a different? Because I usually go with just the defense that I like the week. I don't usually try to differentiate between the two, and that's why I think in my mind why I usually forget to bring them up in cash because it's just always the same defense.
Yeah, last couple of weeks I've been getting real nuts with my defense. I mean, Washington at under 2K last week. I played them because of the rain, and they returned value. The week before that, I think we talked about this. I played the Jets at at 1,500, and even though they only had, I think, 2 points, it's still what you were able to do with the rest of your lineup is great. But it's so risky to not play the Pats and what they're doing. It's unbelievable. So yeah, I guess to answer your question, I usually am in on the Pats when they play. Gonna like the Rams this week, and the 49ers have been one of my favorite defenses all year too. I know it's against CMC, and Allen's done a good job of taking care of the football, but this is a defense that I really respect. They get after the quarterback a ton.
Yeah, I love the San Francisco call. That was one of the ones I was looking at. Just quarterbacks that really struggle under pressure, that will see pressure. So I think that's a great one with San Francisco. I think it's going to be a decent spot if a lot of people are going to roll out Ryan Tannehill, just like grabbing a little bit of leverage with Tampa Bay. Like they don't pressure at an elite rate by any means, like kind of middle of the pack. But like if they do end up getting to Tannehill, and we know that this Tennessee offensive line has been really poor this year. I mean, Tannehill's a guy that'll make mistakes. So I think that's a really interesting one. Only 2,500 on DraftKings. I know they're not a home favorite or anything like that, and we typically would prefer that. But yeah, the Patriots, like, it's really hard to project these guys at this point. It's been nice not having them on the main slate. So yeah, no issues with going all the way up to them. It's just always tough to do in roster construction.
So I'll give you three technically. If you're going to pay up and you don't want to go to the Patriots, a low projected ownership for some reason, I guess maybe everybody thinks Kyle Allen winning games is going to continue or whatever. The 49ers projected ownership is behind the Eagles. It's down by the Chargers. And I guess maybe it's because of the price. I'm not sure. But if you're going to give me the 49ers opportunity for anything, I mean, it's still Kyle Allen, guys. Like, Kyle Allen at some point, he's not lighting the world on fire. He's doing fine. So I will jump on that for more of a tournament because I don't, generally like to spend too much at defense when you have opportunities. So two of the opportunities I'm looking at is one of the most underrated defenses so far this year is the Colts. If you want to talk about, opportunity for there going against Denver and Joe Flacco. So Joe Flacco proved last week he shouldn't even be a quarterback anymore. And then the other one against Daniel Jones, the Detroit Lions. The Detroit Lions secondary is still one of the better units who's actually coming off a disappointing showing. And I think that's why the projected ownership is so low on the Lions is that you're going to get the Lions as one of the cheaper options against Daniel Jones. They could easily pick him off 2 or 3 times.
Yeah, Lions is a great call. I like that one as well. And, you tossed at the Eagles, and I know their defense hasn't been great, but Josh Allen has turned the ball over quite a bit. Right, 7 touchdowns, 7 picks. He's got 3 fumbles. He's
fumbles
actually fumbled 5. Yeah, he fumbles a ton, that guy. So I mean, if you want to spend down, it's not awful. But I do like the Lions call.
Love the Philadelphia call. Just in general, if just over the last 4 weeks, no team on the slate has pressured more than the Philadelphia defensive line. Shout out Sports Info Solutions with that great pressure data. So, I think that Philly at that price versus Josh Allen, someone that'll make mistakes. And they've actually been a little bit more pass heavy than I realized as well. They're above average in their pass percentage over the last 3 games. That's my biggest issue with attacking someone like Joe Flacco is just Denver doesn't throw enough to really have as many opportunities there. But it is Joe Flacco, so I'm with you.
It is Joe Flacco. All right, so let's talk our stacks and then our lineups, and we'll get out of here.
Stack attack.
Who wants to go first?
You.
All right, Chris, go.
I knew you were going to do that. Should I go high or low? What do you want? High or low?
We're playing poker over here?
That's right.
We'll go high.
All-in kid, right? All right,
Yeah.
High is Watson to Hopkins to Kenny Stills.
No.
See, I knew somebody was going to say it. That's why I was going to take it away from somebody. You should have said low, so I could have gone another way. But yeah, that's the stack. Yeah.
No, I like it. Good.
Do it. Go low with Tennessee.
All right, you go, Jay, because now I got to find a new stack.
No, I'm not going Tennessee. Hell no. Hell no. Hell no. Hell no. You know what? I'll go. And this is contingent, obviously, but if I get Drew Brees and Alvin Kamara at those prices and they're both out there, I'm going to go Thomas, Kamara, Drew Brees all day long. Now, if that's not out there, I'll pivot and still go high. I'll go another one high for you, Chris, for that set. Although I do save a little bit. I know the DK Metcalf projected ownership is high, but Russell Wilson and Tyler Lockett are low. I just took your other one. So there's your one right there. So that now Joe's gonna we'll do a 5-minute pause. We need that.
Yeah, now I'm really
technical
panicking.
Difficulties music.
You guys are too sharp, man. No, I love the Russ to DK call too. So my third choice, which I still like quite a bit, we'll go with Matthew Stafford to Kenny Galladay. If everyone's just gonna jump on the Marvin Jones train after those those touchdowns, I think Galladay makes some sense, especially since his price is a little bit elevated. But Matthew Stafford, we probably didn't talk about him enough this week. I think he's one of the best options if you're going to pay down a little bit. Doesn't give you much on the ground. But can you guys remember a week where Matthew Stafford was in like just this amazing spot and he was super chalky and just totally failed us? Like, I can think of a lot of other guys that have hurt me more, I think. So I think this team, like, they're going to throw enough to like Stafford, like, quietly is having an amazing season. Like, his yards per attempt, second in the league, average intended air yards, so similar metric. He's second on the slate as well. So I love Stafford this week against the Giants. I think you could do a lot worse than that.
So here's one we didn't bring up, a tight end. Would you throw in Holkinson?
I would not, compared to all the other guys that we talked about. But yeah, he's probably okay. I think I prefer Galladay though.
Against the Giants, this time last year, you were 100% rolling him out against the Giants.
Sure.
Yeah, of course. This time a couple weeks ago, you were 100% rolling him out there, to be honest and fair.